Now, here's the thing. We can do two things. We can take a break, or we can just move to the panel, to the central panel, which will give us more time to talk things later on. So, כן, הרצל? יאיר אומר פאנל, בסדר. יש זה. Okay, so, here's the thing. For the next panel, I would like to, before I invite, we're talking a lot about the branding of the ecosystem and what differentiates Israeli ecosystem from other ecosystems. I'm going to speak like this. We did, the whole world copied, okay, the whole world, לא, אני אעשה את זה. שומעים אותי גם ככה, נכון?
כן.
Okay. The whole world knows how to copy chief scientists, he knows how to copy VCs and structures and academic programs and all of that, and they did it, right? South Korea copied the kibbutz and they copied the VCs, the chief scientists, they have chief scientists, they have programs. The structure is no longer just Israeli. Then, when we're talking about disruptive innovation, we see multidisciplinary innovation all around the world. We lost that edge as well. Multinationals, Ireland has a multinational center and incentives for multinationals to base their chapters there as well. So this is no longer an edge. Israeli multinational companies, well, we do have some, Tabula and Outbrain and Wix, and we also have some who sell out maybe too fast, like Waze. Is this our differentiator? People already feel the competition, and we're going to talk about it on the next session. What we believe is that we can leverage the next differentiators through other aspects, and the next panel is going to be about this. So I'm inviting Ariel Shapira to run this panel. Ariel writes, he's also an entrepreneur, and he writes for Huffington Post, Jerusalem Post, Maariv, and אנשים במחשבים. You're going to invite...
יכולה לעזור לי רק עם האנשים?
כן.
Hi everyone. So we invite Yair Sarussi, please.
הנה, רבית יא.
דדי פרלמוטר. אייל ולדמן. And Jeffrey Rock. You can hear me, right? So, you know, just hand out the speak. יש עוד מיקרופון תשבי עם המיקרופון. יש עוד אחד לתת לאנשים? So, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ariel Shapira. I founded 2 startups, and I contribute my share to unsuccessful startup in Israel. So, there is only 4%, which is very high according to a lot of standards internationally. I do consulting especially for startups. I write for the Jerusalem Post. I used to write for Maariv. I write for Huffington Post, if you heard about this small online version. And happy to start the discussion here. Okay. So I think that in general, talking the high-tech ecosystem here in Israel has matured, but and I want to hear your output about how mature did it come to. You know, we see that we talked. Yael mentioned ways that people are saying it was sold early. You know, but when you hear the large numbers, you know, you can't really judge them. Facing very high key companies, and then still you hear, and I meet a lot of startups in different stages, and you can hear the different moods. They are not trying to build a company just to sell it like they used to do it 10 or 15 years ago, but people are thinking about building a longer term. And let's start to do a short round and talk about your aspect about how matured are we as the ecosystem here, and if you can really generalize it and talk about it this way. Please, Jeffrey, sorry.
So hi, I think in speaking about the whole ecosystem, I'm not really sure. I know at Google, looking at one of our advantages where we're still seeing we're making an impact here in Israel is we've initiated different programs. We started small here in Israel, and these different programs that we've started have pretty much been adopted and duplicated in other Google sites all over the world. So again, this is taking some of the Israeli initiative and multiplying it within Google worldwide. One example is the Tel Aviv campus. We were actually a few months after London, which was the first one. Our success with campus was so big that it's been launched now in 5 additional sites, and we're going to keep growing that. Another program that we started here in Israel, something called Mind the Gap, which we bring high school girls that around the 9th grade before they decide on what they're going to major in, and we bring them to the Google office, and we show them it's pretty much all hosted by female engineers in Google, and we pretty much show them that there is a career for women in computer science, and we try to encourage them to major in computer science. This is a program that was initiated like 8 years ago here in Israel, and it's now a global program within Google based on what we started here in Israel.
Are we matured? Look at the people here, very matured. And also the crowd here is not that young, and everybody in this room have some experience in technology companies, investing, building companies, and so on. So I think if I would compare it to 30 plus years ago, we have here a whole generation of people that already made it at least once, have built something or succeeded, and bring its experience to the next generation. And as someone that visits many companies, I was involved in tech at the time, I'm now chairman of a bank, I feel that every visit that I see tremendous talent, and I see different generation in every company. So it's not anymore just young people, you see the combination of different experiences. I've been yesterday in Herzliya in some companies. I can tell you everywhere you touch, you see the mix. In terms of are we able to build large companies, an issue that comes many times, well, we will hear from Eyal soon, and Daddy that has this experience in large companies, but more difficult to keep a company for a long time, easier to have a shorter run. Being far away from the markets is no doubt a difficulty, and also let's remember that the markets in general of tech are merging. Each time there are some consolidations, and it's not that easy to keep momentum for a long time. I think that no doubt this is an issue of that needs to be, or that we have to spend more time on how to keep more companies that will stay there at least to an IPO, and will be able to be independent for a while. And hopefully we will see, as we've seen in the last 2 years, more companies that were able to go to a NASDAQ IPO, and then they are the acquirer of others in the field. And this is also a sort of being matured. The issue of locals or domestic versus multinationals is also an interesting one. In the beginning, you feel that the talent goes to the multinationals, but then you see a whole generation of people that leaves the multinationals and become domestic entrepreneurs. So I think that this issue of expansion through experience that is more international is also part of a market that is more matured, and no doubt as long as Israel continues to be attractive to these multinationals, we will see more and more groups of talent leaving them and building their dream, and this is part of, I think, the future success that I'm sure will continue here. Thanks.
I'm not sure I know how to answer this question, because maturing, if you measure it by age, I'm in this industry for 36 years, so it is mature, 36 years already, and it started before me. I like to use the term evolving. The tech industry is definitely evolving and growing and changing, and I think that what we would like to see, and we see the signs, and the previous speaker mentioned that, the willingness of more and more entrepreneurs to go into the adventure of going beyond selling the company in the relatively early stage, which I think is a good and positive, because the Israeli tech was up to now, other than few exceptions, one of them is sitting on my right, that it was very much based on multinationals and Israeli startups that, if they are successful, send themselves to some multinational that either take this technology away and in most cases leave it here as a development center. It's very good, and I don't have anything against multinationals. I made most of my career in the one. I'm not against the startup phenomena that in many aspects go to exit. It happens also in Silicon Valley, and no one can complain. But the Silicon Valley generates not only giants like an Intel or an Apple or a Facebook or a Google, it generates a lot of multi-billion dollars, and I measure by revenue, not by valuation, which is by far a healthier ecosystem. If you look from the Israeli economy, and the first speaker talked about the GDP of Israel, which is still small. If you want to create GDPs, you want to have much more Mellanoxes than Wazes, with all the respect to Waze. And I think that that's a next phase Israel is to do. One of the issues of maturity, and when you are mature, you have to plan better. And Israel is very good at planning. I'm a bit sarcastic, because the success of the Israeli high-tech, it start outgrowing the capabilities of the country. And other than growing the amount of available engineers, if you look at the numbers, how many graduates 5 units of mathematics, it goes down, which means that the country does not invest, and I could go on and on with many others. If for the last 20, 30 years, it was by luck that we have enough students and Russian immigration to fill the positions. Now, if you don't do planning, we could kill the maturing development. So I think I'm optimistic on one hand, huge amount of ideas, huge amount of potential, and the fund that I'm raising money for now is aimed at investing in companies that are going to growth. Nevertheless, I'm definitely concerned about the ability of the country to fulfill this growth, which is the only hope for Israel to grow its GDP. I don't see any other opportunity other than the tech industry.
So for me, I've been running this company, Mellanox, for about 17 years, but it seems like every day it's just the beginning. And when I say this to people, they think that I'm joking, but I'm very serious about this. I think the market is so big, and where we play, we're so small, that even though we sold last year about $658 million, it's just the beginning, and the market is about $14 billion. There's a lot of growth in front of us, and I feel like we nearly didn't do anything. There's so much in front of us to do. So when you come to work and you understand that the mountain or the pile or anything in front of you is so much bigger and higher than what you've done in the past, I think you feel like you're only in the beginning, regardless of what you've done in the past 16, 17 years. And now there's another 16, 17 years to go and climb even a larger mountain, get a larger pile, and so on. So in terms of maturity, it's really, I think, the mindset of, I think, small, medium, I think we're a small, medium company, is a mindset of we have so much more to do in front of us, and then you have all of the planning, execution to do behind that. In terms of you know, the Israeli high-tech ecosystem, I completely agree with that. We need to invest in education, education, education. That's the only thing that yields minds that can do checkpoint and Amdocs and NICE and Wix and Waze and everything else. If we don't invest in education, other economies will bypass us and be faster and better. I think the mindset in Israel, and we're very lucky about this, if you look at what's happening in Germany, there are very few startups in Germany. And I don't know how it is in Spain. But the mindset in Germany, so I think it's more a cultural thing, where if you look at the best engineers in Germany, they would like to go and work for a large corporation. They're very much afraid of failure. The same thing in Japan. They will go, and the best engineers will go and work for the larger companies because they feel very comfortable, they feel secure. Those are the best jobs. Here in Israel, you see the best students, they don't want to go and work for the large companies. They want to do something themselves. They want to go for the smaller companies, for the riskier companies. And this culture set is what keeps us with very high energy and with very large amounts of startups starting every day, as opposed to what's happening in Japan, in Germany, and other places. And I think that's something that we need to encourage and so on. Regarding whether to sell or to grow a large enterprise, I think it's a very subjective question. It is very, 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 very difficult to build an organization. I applaud any company that succeeds, whether in selling the company or growing a larger company. I know how difficult it is, so it's really a question of the people that's leading this and the ecosystem around this and the events. You know, I knew the VMware founders and investors. VMware was sold to EMC at about $600 million in the mid-2000s. And everybody thought it's a great success. $600 million to do an exit, it looks good. The company today is worth tens of billions of dollars. So if that company, and it may not have happened if it wouldn't be part of EMC. So asking the questions whether they would have stayed as an independent company would brought them to tens of billions of dollars, or doing this transaction to EMC was the right thing. It's a very difficult question. There's no right or wrong answer, and I think both examples are good examples.
Thank you. So I think, you know, in Israel we have about 7,000 startups, you know, and everyone sort of have an idea. You know, you can you run your day and talk with several different people and heard, I have this idea and this idea, and you know, all of the advanced in the cloud computing has enabled a lot of companies, really, you know, small startups to start with very limited budgeted and to escalate later on upon their growth to build a startup. And you know, this is if you don't know if you know this is a very small camera that I have here, and I think this is an HD video camera which is transformed to my mobile. It cost me less than $50. I invited it from China, and miraculously it arrived even with our mail services. And I think this is sort of, in a nutshell, you know, an example of how innovation should always keep you going. You know, and I wanted to take your side of, you know, if like I don't meet I meet a lot of companies, startups, small companies, big companies, enterprise here in Israel and abroad. Everyone, you know, talks about innovation. You know, I didn't hear any company that said we are not into innovation. Everyone is in innovation, but I want to take your aspect, you know, from this vision, you know, from this text in your website. How do you really take it on? How do you really make this innovation once you're up and running, once you're grown? How do you take it and really keep it going? So this for example, this kind of cameras and other similar cameras that are produced very high quality these days. The reason that, for example, GoPro will have to invent itself again and again. They are succeeding in some, they are not succeeding in other panels. They lost a lot of their substantial growth in the market because of this kind of advancement. How do you take, taking that their innovation can be made very easy in other companies with the current technology? How do you keep your big organization innovation all of the time, and keeping your edge all the time?
I'll take a stab at this, and being a larger company that really we've got on our motto innovation. So one of the things that that's within our culture is we even promote something we call 20%. Every engineer at Google has the opportunity to work on something that's not their core project in 20% of the time. Now it could be working on a different type of product. It could be just an idea that that someone came up with. Typically, someone who is working on 20% will try to get that whatever that is. Hopefully, they'll get some collaboration with other people. And if it's a successful idea, it can be promoted and kind of graduate to a real project, and then you'll start asking for headcount. And from your 20% innovation that the company promotes, all of a sudden we're going to come up with a new product. Gmail started as someone's 20%. They didn't like at the time the email systems, and they started writing Gmail. So this is something that constantly, even though we're a big company, over 60,000 people, this is something that's really in the DNA of the company. And it's something that if someone has an idea, you're going to get your manager and you're going to get the whole organization behind you. Yeah, try this. Again, if it is a bad idea, fail quickly. But it's okay to try something and fail. This is something also that's in the culture. All right, not all ideas are great, but it's okay to come up with something and fail at that. So I think that's one thing that also helps with innovation. Also within Google, there's also a lot of mobility. So if you're working on a big project and then you see a different area that looks starting up and and you perceive it as innovative, then again we encourage that mobility. So these things will help and do help us maintain the innovation.
Thank you.
Well, in the case of a bank is a conservative, regulated group. So the first issue is really how to open an organization to the outside world, not to think that you can do it all by yourself. In the moment there is an interaction, things start to change. So I want to, and I'm trying to be as much open and to open the organization out to the outside, and also to listen to all the ideas that comes up in many ways, to bring them up. Because also, not all the knowledge exists only at the top, as you know. And you have to see from everyone in the organization that you can use the minds. And I think this is a structural and issue that you need to work all the time on it in organization like a bank in order to have it really open to innovation. So this is the first phase. So what do you do? So I'll tell you a story about last Thursday because I saw Moish here. Stand up for a second. And Moish did to me one of the best tours in the country. It's not far away from here, and it's in Bnei Brak. He's a Haredi, and he took me in the evening of last Thursday to see how there are startups within Bnei Brak, could you imagine, and how they build a group of people that wants to do such innovation within their culture. But not only that, they bring them later on to grow within matured Israeli tech companies. So this is not just an accelerator, but accelerator that use others later on, like Mellanox or others, that helps them later on to these companies. I think this is one of the greatest innovation that I've seen in this country recently, because this is you understanding where is the extra human resource that we have and how do you use it properly in order to have a chance of succeeding. And I've seen some very interesting things over there. Some of them will be presented to the bank. What have we done here? In a nutshell, I would say, in the last 5-6 years, I did a fintech program. I invited here, it was about 5 years ago, I invited Israeli financial technology companies to come and test their systems in Bank Hapoalim. At the time, we knew about 10. Until today, we've seen over 400 companies that we checked. And we became a hub. Second stage, so first of all, and 12 of those technologies are already used in Bank Hapoalim. We were like the first customers in different areas. Some of them very interesting technologies. What have we done next? In 2-3 years ago, when I was at IMF, we met all the chairman CEOs, I suggested exchange of information. I told them, listen, we could be a hub. Don't just try to find out companies. So we have today a group of like 15 of the biggest multinationals, financial institutions in the world that come and visit this country. We show them what exists here, and we help really many startup companies to open doors to the biggest financial companies. What is it doing to us? Exchange of information. They are deciding to invest in some startup in New York. Many times they will invite us to join. So this is the type of stuff that you have to think all the time as an organization that have some advantages over here because we're not big. We speak to all of them are friends of ours. And I know the group, most of the people here. We speak, we can exchange. And that's, if you ask me, what is really what makes this market a bit different than other markets that you have mentioned before on a competitive basis, is that I think it's very easy to approach everyone here. Easy to approach every CEO or chairman here. We go and I visit all the time startup companies, whether they are in the Negev or in the Galilee or here in the center. And this is a different phenomenon of openness, I think, than most markets. We know each other, we speak in the circles, and we can exchange ideas. And this is really, as long as we are able to keep this ecosystem, this is really the chance of being real energetic and innovative country and economy. Thank you.
1 second before, I think, just to add to what you said, I think, that the future of digital banking and the ability for banks to create an advantage of other banks that they are competing against will be to create digital tools and to create sort of an app store that under the regularity and under all of the things that you allow will enable a lot of ideas to enter this banking world, to the fintech arena. And I think, and I meet a lot of big organizations that some of them admit it, some of them don't want to admit it, but I think this is in generally true. Large organizations can't do innovation alone, and they have to have, sort of the outside sources, and as much as they open to this idea and really open themselves, this is something that can give them the edge to survive and to be the best of all.
I just want to add about it. Where we are today, we are in a real transformation of the bank into what I call people and technology in this order. Enoshi וטכנולוגי. It's not just technology or digital. It must have both elements, at least in our DNA of Bank Hapoalim. We want to have first the people, and then we want to have the technology. And what we are trying to do is really to mix it in everything, with the customer and internally with the people. And by that, moving to the next generation, I can tell you that even in research that I've seen recently came out of KPMG in Australia, with the new generation of people between 18 to 30, we've seen the following. They are using only digital in most transactions, like 98%. But when they have a real decision, they want to see someone physically. When they need to take a big loan, they want to see someone. When they make a decision about a mortgage, and I'm not talking about Israel, they want to have a face next to them, speaking to them. And this is really what I think will be the future here as well. The combination, things will become commodity and will be done by technologies, and the portion, the more difficult, the more, I would say, added value will come by talking to someone personally.
No, the word innovation start being overused in my mind. Everybody talks today about innovation, it become the buzzword, the prime minister. But the moment prime ministers talk about this one, I know that something is bad. Because much fewer people know what it means. I'll give you my definition of innovation, which is very different than ideas. I know a lot of people that could generate an idea per second, and they've never generated anything in their life, because an innovation is to take an idea, and you have to have a lot of ideas, and previous speaker talked about this one, until you generate one that really works and gets something. But at the end of the day, in innovation, that you've done something which is completely different than many things that you've done and had a value. So my number one rule in innovation is to have a differentiated idea. It could be on technology, it could be
It's
on
all
usage
about
model.
execution.
At the end of the day, Edison, I have a whole lecture of an hour about innovation, but I've ended with a quote from Edison, which you can't say it wasn't innovative. He said, genius is 1% innovation or a genius and 99% participation, which is there. You know, it's a hard work. At the end of the day, there's no replacement of working hard and spending a lot of hours. And many of us have been in the technology industry know that. Sorry? Yeah.
So Israelis innovate because they work harder or because they have that 1%?
No, it's both. I think it's both. You cannot, if you don't have the 1%, your hard work doesn't matter. If you only have the 1%, you don't do the 99%, it doesn't matter either. So you have to have both. At the end of the day, the 100% matter, not 1 or 99. So I end up with this one. There are multiple ways to create new ideas. And I think Yair said it right. It's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem within a large company. You have to have an ecosystem that allows, and there are multiple ways to skin the cat. They talk about the 20%. In Intel, I personally use what I call a greenfield. I use Intel Israel as a greenfield, a place that you don't work on the mainstream and you could think about other stuff. The problem is what happens when the new idea becomes a mainstream. You have to reinvent a new greenfield or whatever. But it's all about the ecosystem. Why these large companies buy startup companies? Because no big company is as much as big as it could be, cannot invent new things, and you have to be open to different ideas. We talked about the culture of allowing people to fail. If you don't allow people to fail, then it doesn't matter. People will not try it again. And but I think, in my view, there are multiple ways, but it's the differentiation that matters. Just being different doesn't matter. I think one of the drawbacks in Israel, they like things that are different. Doesn't matter who needs it, but it's different, then it's okay. It have to be differentiated by giving something that people say, aha, I didn't know about this one before, but now that that's it, I really need it. And I think that spending the time, the energy, putting the skills and the discipline and the hard work to eventually get things done, because other than that, nothing happens.
So how do we innovate in Mellanox? We basically do three things. One is we always try to do as close to the impossible as we can reach, and we're always leading. So we look at what's happening in the industry, and we're always trying to be a generation ahead. So you take a young group of engineers, they don't know how difficult it is. And if you would have taken a much more experienced group, they'd say, we're not going that way. You take a very young group of engineers, you tell them, okay, we need to get there. They don't know it's very difficult, and they just do it, and they execute. So number one is we take very aggressive challenges ahead of the industry that are very interesting, very difficult to achieve. So that's number one. Number two is we try to innovate in everything. So it's not just that those projects that are the leading projects in Mellanox, but also in how we screw all of our screws in the box. We want to be better than other people. So we look at how to be innovative in our productions, in our monitoring of how each screw strength is the right thing. If we can do things better in small things, it's a small advantage. that we can have over our competition, and then our resiliency and our gap in technology, which is even very simple and small. We try to be innovative in everything we do, how we clean the floors, how we put the air conditioning. It sounds sometimes not serious, but if you look at everything that's happening in the company and you try to think ahead of other people, you'll get an advantage in small things. And the last thing we're doing, it's not like what Google does, but we do hackathons, and every so often, every like 6 months or sometimes 4 months, each employee can form a group, come with an ID, and they have a budget for, I think, 3 days to do whatever they want. And out of those hackathons, I think we have at least 10 programs that went to production. So we have one innovative in trying to get better than anybody in the competitor marketplace that we are playing in. Second, we try to innovate in everything, small, large, medium, that we can to give us an advantage. And three, we do the hackathons so people can bring their ideas and try to implement them themselves.
I think, that hackathons is a very, very good way, to think out of the box, really to, even though this saying is getting old, but I think what I saw a lot of hackathons that are being done inside the company, but I think the most successful ones are to take different companies and to do complex teams and have people see how other people thinking, because once you are in Mellanox or in Intel or Google, you get a sort of a way of thinking. You have your Google way, you have your Mellanox way, you have your Intel way, you have your bank way, you have, so even though you want to open yourself outside, still you go on the same path, even if you build a different path from time to time. So I think this is something that really opens the mind of how people are, to open them to creativity in some.
The problem is, who does the IP belong to after that?
No, these are even small projects, that
even small projects can lead to some IP, and then we need the lawyers to do the IP litigation. And
they do need the job. There are a few lawyers in Israel, or around the globe. So
we have some experience.
So we need to help them. Let's talk about the story. Everyone has a story, starting from every human being to a small startup to a very big company. And how do you grow this story? And how, do you see it, and taking in relation to us being in Israel? Do you see this story being mixed with the political story of Israel, causing you problems, or how do you deal with it, or not?
So there were a few parts of the question. I'll talk about the
Google story.
Again, our story. Look at from Google Israel's perspective. And our story is
Sorry to interrupt you, but if you can focus, is there a really Israeli Google story, Google Israel story, or
yes,
this is Google and this is sort of a landmark?
So I'll focus again. Our story is pretty much just like you said, showing results in being successful. In every product area that Google Israel has focused on, we've done extremely well, and Google recognizes that, and they give us, okay, you guys can keep growing, you're going to get more responsibility. That's pretty much our story. It's a story of taking on big projects, challenging ourselves, and succeeding. 2 years ago, I took on a project that within the search area and expanding part of what we call the Google One box, like when you put in Google Weather and you see today's weather, expanding that to the other languages and so on. And when I took on this project, I read documents, everyone explaining to me why this is not going to work. Okay, and I met with people in Mountain View and so on. Again, everyone telling me, oh yeah, we've tried stuff like this, it's not going to work. So that every time someone told me this is not going to work, that was even more challenging for me to succeed. And pretty much we brought a group of people together that all liked this challenge. And to make a long story short, today this program is successful in Israel, and it's been replicated in other sites within Google. So again, we took something, it was an idea, we succeeded, and that's pretty much our Israeli story.
And as for as the political issues of Israel, how do you feel it in your work, or since this is a organization control outside of Israel, it's not something you deal with?
So I don't, I don't feel it, and I think we do a pretty good job not to make it an issue. Okay, even if things are going on, we'll, meetings as usual. We ourselves don't make a big issue if there are things going on in the political situation, and that's how it's perceived within Google. So it's not, I don't see it as something on our shoulder.
Your office is based in Tel Aviv, during, the last events, last year or so. So how did you, you have to explain it to your, I heard a lot of Skype calls, being interrupted because, that people had to go, to the shelters, etc.
So I think it was like, since we didn't make a big deal out of it, said, oh, listen, there's a siren. It was in the middle of the day. There could have been an alarm. We would have said, look, we've got to go to our bomb shelter. We'll ping you guys when we're done. And didn't make a big deal out of it, and that was it. On their end, maybe they said, wow, what's going on in Israel? But it was kind of the way we told the story.
I want to mention something to your question, because Eyal did help us during Operation Iron Dome. We talked to Israeli tech people and asked them what can we do about it. I called Eyal. He was in Brazil at the time, and the idea was not to make a big deal out of it. We made a movie called Innovation Nation in Action, Resilience, and we just interviewed some entrepreneurs showing their routine spirit of innovating in Tel Aviv at the time. We also interviewed an American guy who was working at Yevo, and he basically said, well, there's this little routine that we hear the siren, we go into the room, and then we come back and we continue to move on. That was the best way to do this, and toda.
Well, let's start with the interaction between people and the hackathons and so on. We are based here. Well, we are based here, and but we are spread all over the country. So we have different people from all religious, all colors, everything that you can think of that exists in this country exists in a bank. People in the north, people in the south. When there is a problem there, we have to be in the south. When there is a problem in the north, we go to the north, and we are covering it all. When we do a hackathon, to your question, we don't need to bring people from the outside. We just bring them all together, and we mix them, people that never work together. When we do it, this is one of the best exercises of Bank Hapoalim, and we do many such events now. And these events really bring people together. We bring the technology guys with the people that deal with credit, with those that are just dealing with the north. You mix them and you come with an application that you never thought about. So this is one thing that you are able to do in an organization which is spread in a place and try to bring the maximum type of ideas that comes up. Yes, it's not that you have to build in this country, the character that you have to build really in order to survive for a long time. And I think that's part of the benefits of doing business here, even for international companies, that you have a group that you know will be very dedicated to what they do. And if they decide to go after a mission, they will do it. And I think this is part of what I learned through years that works better than many other markets.
I want to touch on multiple things. One, there is an Israeli story. Definitely in Intel, there's an Intel-Israel story, which is very unique within Intel. And the previous CEO said it public that Intel Israel saved Intel in 2006 by the innovation that this group of people have created for Intel. And I'll not get into the details. It's a big deal. And the result of Intel growing from about 50 people when I joined Intel in 1980 to more than 4,000 people today in the development center. It's a huge impact on Israel economy, and just Intel published that 11% of Israeli high-tech export is Intel Israel. So I'm not part of Intel anymore, but we're still very proud. I'll divide the political situation of Israeli high-tech in general, but very much in multinationals, but I bet it's true for anyone else, to three pieces. This is the one what I call the resilience. That I think that Israel have made it very clear in many of the aspects that you don't lose a single working day independent of what happens. And since Intel Israel is very, since 1974, the interesting story that Intel was supposed to be open in activity in Israel in October 73. There was a VP that was supposed to come in October 73 to hire the first engineers for Intel Israel. Why he haven't come in October 73, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. Why he came back in July 74, that's a bigger question. But he did come, and the rest is history. We've gone through multiple wars and situations. I remember that in the first Iraq war in 1991, basically the whole Israel was shut down. The government said don't go out and don't go to work. I remember I got a phone call from Dov Fruman at 3 a.m. in the morning. I bet Eyal may remember that. And he said, Daddy, tomorrow morning, every employee at Intel goes to work independent of what the government says. And he was right. You don't close the country just because things happen. I think in that perspective, the whole Israeli industry gets very high remarks, and everybody at Intel knew that it doesn't stop. But there are two other aspects that related to that. One is top management decision-making process. Now, you may not know everything that they talk and how they consider the situation in Israel. I had a glimpse of it because I was at the Intel management team, and I was also sitting on the Intel board meeting, and I'm telling you, that was discussed. The worry about the risk of creating and putting a large operation in Israel and the dependency of a whole company. And you think about Intel, don't think that what would happen to a factory that generates big portion of their output, and they don't think about what they do. I was proposing a huge strategic transformation back in April 2003 to Intel, and the CEO at that time said that I'm idiot because I'm putting the whole Intel between Yasser Arafat and Arik Sharon. He didn't like neither of them. So it does happen. And if you think that because you work hard and don't do the working day, they don't take it in consideration, they do. And all the precautions need to be taken. This is a third aspect, which is very much on the past few years, which is how Israel is being perceived by people. And this is I agree with you. When I worked at Intel, there was not that many people that approached me with criticism, but you see it sometimes under the ground. I think it's our job to explain the position at Intel, at Israel. I always said to many people, I see myself as a representative of the state of Israel. I'm definitely not a representative of the government of Israel. I don't always agree with what they do. It's okay to criticize. I try to explain the situation as it is and try to paint a larger, broader picture than what it is. But it is getting harder and harder to explain, much less within the big company, with more people more mature. But when you go out to universities, and my wife and I established a big operation of youngsters in Israeli youngsters in US universities, and the amount of criticism of Israel, not just the government, but the whole thing is huge. And everybody that don't see that with their own eyes and don't hear that does not understand the complexity of the situation. I think it is our role on one side to explain Israel, on one side to sometimes help the government to change their ways because sometimes we do help the haters of Israel to criticize us. So I think that it's an A++ on the first one. I think it's very good on helping the big management to make the decision, because at the end of the day, investments in Israel are still big and are not slowing down, but they might. We don't have to think that they will continue to flow. And I'm hearing now that I'm raising money for a fund that in Europe especially, the advice I get, don't talk about Israel, talk about Tel Aviv and high tech, which is in their mind is a different animal for some reason. On the third one of the public opinion, I think situation is eroding in the last few years.
For me, it's simple. Yeah.
Wait, Bill, on scene. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Let him finish and then go to your question. Thank you.
So for us, it's a simple. I mean, us, the big organization is in Israel, so I think we make the decisions in Israel. Right.
Last time I checked.
You're on the board, so.
I know.
But so for us, we make the decision in Israel, and it's the second company I've been involved. My Israeli story is Galileo Technology and Mellanox Technologies, and I think the important thing is to build larger Israeli companies that can make decisions here and not the other way around. And we actually acquired companies international in the US, in Denmark, and obviously in Israel. But it's important. The way the political, we try not to get involved in the political situations. We don't feel that the geopolitical ecosystem around Israel impacts Mellanox in a significant way. People need to use our technology, want to use the technology. We also sell to Arab countries that don't have relations with Israel. We have channels to do that, and it's okay from our perspective. Basically, if we keep business as usual, and no one talked, but in some of the operations, we had about 30 to 33% of our employees in reserve duties, and that's something that you need to overcome. And when you do this, and people from the other side are used to talk to certain people, then they go away for 3-5 weeks into reserve duties, and they're not there to work and give you answers, then you need to start and say, okay, we are still going to meet the schedule for the project, and we're going to cover for the people that are in reserve duties. So we've done this at least 2 or 3 times in our lives. We also have a center in Ramallah. They don't go to reserve duties, lucky for us. But we collaborate and we try to minimize the political situation in Israel.
Please, your question.
From Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sir.
Can you just tell us?
That's on from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
From a Ministry of Foreign Affairs point of view, part of the work that was presented by Mr. Lev is taking your work and presenting it as it is to many countries around the world. Now, my question pertains mostly to the two of you that represent, or represented in your case, a multinational. Where, and please be as open as you can, and I know this is a sensitive issue, especially in Intel today, but also in Google. Where is Google Israel end and Google International takes place when it comes to the image and the products that are manufactured by the local branch here that can be branded Israel, like Google Israel or Intel Israel?
I'll start since I have more years of experience. This is the wrong way to ask a multinational happening in Israel to ask that question. It took us several years of a lot of problems. At the end of the day, if you are an Intel employee in Israel or you are a Google employee in Israel, at the end of the day, you're a Google employee or Intel employee, and the best interest of the company have to be taken care of. And each time we kind of try to maneuver between this is better for Intel Israel, but maybe not so good for Intel. At the end of the day, the backfire was big. So we decided as a strategy not to do that. Now, at the end of the day, a product is an Intel product. It's not an Intel product. We've been very smart, and it was supported by the company to say that this is a product that has been created in Israel. I don't think that anyone in the world have a confusion about what product have been done. It's okay by Intel. I think Intel is also saying that was done. There was a big things in the press just a few months ago about the new microprocessor coming, and it was designed in Haifa. So Intel is okay being public about this one. And I think it took a long time to convince the company that is the benefit of the company, as long as it is clear that we're not promoting an Intel Israel unique branding strategy. So you have to be very careful about this one. So as long as you promote and you know that you understand that you are a citizen of this company and you're in any employee, but definitely as an executive of the company, you have to take care about the company benefits. Now, if there's going to be huge conflict, that's a different question, what do you do? But I don't think we are even close to this kind of situations. So you have to be very careful about this one. The more good you are for the company, the more leeway you have to brand yourself as a unique situation.
So I'll second pretty much what you said. Again, our products, I say our products is Google products. Again, we're developing, everything we do is for Google worldwide. Even the things that we brag about that have been done in Israel, we're still part of the whole Google stack and infrastructure and so on. So, and we're part of a larger group that's based in Mountain View. I think one thing maybe, again, one thing that we feel more part of the remote, meaning the part of the development teams that are not in Mountain View, which is Google's headquarters. We have similar issues like with the team in Korea and the team in Germany. So if there is some identity or whatever, it's maybe the remote offices versus headquarters, which is always, in our work for a few international companies, there's always a little bit of, I don't know, friction, but a challenge. When the bulk of the company is somewhere else, you're remote, you're at a different time zone, those are some of the challenges. But not, it's not, okay, this is the Israeli product made here, because again, we're part of, everything we do is still part of a big stack that's part of Google.
People like us or politicians from Israel put you on the spot. When we brand what you do here as Google Israel, does it put you on the spot, or you're out of it and you can always say this is government people saying this is not us?
Personally, I haven't been put on the spot, so it's kind of hard for me to. And I think some of the things we're proud of and so on, we will say, yeah, Google Trends did start here. But it's, again, second breath is, okay, but we're still part of the global Google system and so on.
I just want to use it because we speak about international. It reminded me that we have another, call it resource, and these are Israelis that are living for a long time outside of the country. You work with them, and sometimes you bring them back. So I want Yoav, that I saw came in. Yoav, stand up. Yoav is the new CTO of Bank Hapoalim. He comes after 25 years. He was senior at Bank of America, and before that at Deutsche. So we are very proud to have a CTO that has 25 years of international banking experience at the top level of banking in the world. See? So this is another resource when we speak about international, is really to use the community that lives outside in the Silicon Valley, studies and so on and on. I'm sure you have it as well in many friends that are, and exchange of ideas, networks and so on, which are very important in all the aspects we are talking about over here.
is also called brain gain. I want to continue what Jeffrey said. Your answer, Elad, and it continues to what Yair mentioned before. The thing in Israel with the multinationals, the things that they can do, sometimes it's not something that a government entity can talk about it worldwide, but it is being done here, and the people in the global ecosystem of high-tech are aware of it. A few years ago, Jeffrey was part of it. We initiated the multinational R&D forum in Israel. This is an initiative that was initiated by high-tech ambassadors, but by us. And we worked for 1 year. We got R&D CEOs of R&D centers, such as Google, IBM, Intel, Motorola, General Motors, SAP, HP, Oracle, Microsoft, to sit together in one room. Basically because they all sit very close by to one another, and they could put aside the competition and talk about the mutual challenges they all have. So they came up with actual programs to work together. And some of the initiatives or the accomplishments where they can actually help each other to persuade the corporate to put more manpower here in Israel, to put more emphasis on the center here, simply because this center, I mean, Google can tell Microsoft, look, Microsoft created accelerators, we cannot afford not to do it. And they actually helped each other. Intel, Dadi, invited on the stage of Tzave to Barcelona 4 years ago. Intel VP stood on the stage and invited or challenged ARM global VP who was here at the conference. He challenged him, he told him, I'm going to help you, we love competition here in Israel, I'm going to help you establish an R&D center here in Israel. I'll present you all the government incentives, I'll present you all the people here in the industry. The first day you open an R&D center here, I'm going to steal your brains. And basically ARM did create it later on here. So it's not something for the government to speak about. It's not something that you communicate to the mass market, but the people in the global high-tech are aware of what goes on here, of this Israeli character.
So, so one last thing, you know, before we head out to work, as you said, for some of us.
We need to work hard, the 99%.
You know, if you can just summarize, you know, one thing, one practical tip, you know, for the Israeli high-tech ecosystem to, you know, how to evolve more, you know, if you can try to focus on one tip that you can see in your perspective, please do, and we will finalize with this, please.
I'll go first, and actually I have something pretty simple and so on. It's something that I learned many years ago in the army, that I was told, יש הצלחות ויש סיפורים. Meaning, either there's either success or a lot of stories. So I think the best tip is to come up with success stories.
Not stories, success.
Yeah, to show success.
Make the stories real other than just stories. There are many things I could talk about, but if there's one thing, I do not believe that the government fully understands the fact that the Ministry of Finance eventually found that there's a problem of manpower in the high-tech industry and that's going to slow down. You know, thank God it's now. Everybody that you could have talked about could foresee that 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Eyal disagrees with you. He thinks this is not the problem.
I think it is a problem. I think it is a problem if you want to think about the growth of the industry in Israel. It is a problem. Eyal and I disagree on many things.
No, I don't. By the way, no, I said we have enough manpower that we can hire. I didn't say it's no problem. I think we need to invest in education. We need to continue investing in education. But what we're seeing today is we have very good employees from first degree, masters, and PhD, and I think we can continue hiring. But
I'm not arguing this one. I'm looking, what I learned working for a multinational is that sometimes it's okay to plan a little bit more than 5 minutes from now. On the other hand, it's very hard for me to get used to the way American people think about they want to plan years in advance. They could get to that they are going to get married in 2 years, put it on your calendar. I don't know, even Google Calendar, I don't know how to find my 2 years calendar 2 years from now. But the issue is not for tomorrow. And in order to really have an industry which is knowledge-based, you don't have to look for any gas or oil in the ocean or in the Mediterranean. It exists, you have to cultivate it. And I think in my mind, like any kind of bad profits, maybe I'll be wrong and maybe everything is going to be okay. But if you want to grow an industry, if you want to grow it beyond the limit of the few people that still enjoy these wonderful returns that this industry gives the people that work in it, there's a big change, and the change is in education. The change is in getting more parts of the Israeli society to participate. It could be part of the Haredi part, the Arabs population, people on the periphery. The people that enjoy the goodness of this industry are still in a relatively smaller part of the Israeli society. I think expanding it would help twice. More employees that Eyal could get on, and if I'm going to invest in large growing companies that have employees to hire and to work in. And the second one is going to help the growth of the company, the growth of Israel in a much more equal way, because more people and more part of the population will enjoy the wealth that this industry delivers.
For me, I think it's a simple thing. There's, you call it excuses or stories, but it's just persistence and execution and being the most professional manner that you can do things. So you need to find the right people, be persistent, and execute, and you can be successful. A lot of people are hesitant before they start doing things, but if you know what you're doing, I think it's a good recipe for success.
Well, I'll combine everything that was said here, and I think that it's about the people that you are able to bring together and how to help them take the maximum out of what they are doing. So when it comes to a company or corporate, like each one of us is part of or was part of, we can influence, we can do it in our own way. And I think you see the difference between organization, and their success always go by the type of people that they have and the type of culture they were able to build. But when it comes to policy and government policy, see that what is most successful in this country is the areas that there is less intervention. And this is in technology. This is where the Israeli culture fits the ecosystem that exists. And when you try to put too many restrictions on the different industries, you really take out the will to take the risk, to be more innovative, and to grow faster. And this is, I think, slowing down part of our economy as of today compared to the potential that we have. So these are the two parts. The corporate that I think I saw many success stories. The government that in some areas was successful when it allowed more space to the companies, and really when restricted caused slowdown, which is part of the problem of today. And I really hope that we will continue to remember that we need to increase the private sector, increase the productivity in this market, and this should be, as of for the next several years, again, a flag of growth and of really being more productive for having higher level employment in this country. Thanks.
Thank you very much all. Thank you.